Are you starting a nonprofit? Let's talk about how to apply the concepts from the 12-week year by Brian P. Moran and Michael Lennington to create a startup action plan to get things off the ground. Those who know me know that I love to consume management and leadership and business and self-help types of books, and I recently listened to the 12-week year on audiobook. And so this is all fresh in my mind, and I really think there's a way to apply some of the concepts to the process of starting a nonprofit. Now, the whole basis of the 12-week year is that we can develop a plan to execute on our goals in a condensed 12-week timeline, as opposed to thinking of accomplishing our goals in a traditional year-long or annual timeline. The basic idea here is if we give ourselves a whole year to accomplish a specific goal or handful of goals, then we're inevitably going to procrastinate, or we're going to get overwhelmed by the size of those goals. But if we can break the goals down into manageable but still ambitious chunks that we can accomplish in 12-week segments, and then we're going to actually accomplish a lot more in a year. Welcome back. I'm Amber Melanie Smith. I'm a nonprofit founder and social entrepreneur, and I make these videos here on YouTube to help folks who want to make an impact and need a little bit of help and guidance to figure out the steps to do just that. Whether you're starting a nonprofit or fundraising for a cause that you care about, serving on a board, and other ways to do good. Don't forget to check out my website, foundertofulltime.com, where I have some articles and online resources and courses for people who are starting a nonprofit or developing a fundraising strategy. I hope those are helpful to you. And of course, subscribe to my newsletter, which is linked below this video for tips and sometimes funding opportunities that I come across too. So let's talk about how to apply the 12-week year framework to the process of starting a nonprofit. Now, a quick disclaimer, because some of the things that are part of the process of starting a nonprofit, such as waiting for the IRS to approve your nonprofit tax exempt status, are outside of our control. But the whole point of the 12-week year framework is that we're going to be measuring our success based on the things we can control. For example, you can control how many grant applications you submit, but you can't control how many grants you actually get, because there are external factors at play that you have no say over, such as who are your competitors and how many other applicants were there. So in the part of the video that follows, I'm going to break down a suggested timeline for how you would use 2 rounds of the 12-week year cycle to complete the process to start a nonprofit, so totaling approximately 6 months. Now, I started a nonprofit years ago, and if I had to do it all over again, I would follow the timeline that I'm going to talk about here. So let's talk about the first 12 weeks. Now, you might assume that the first steps are all about finding a name for your nonprofit and starting to get your paperwork together. That is not how I would do it at all. In fact, the most successful nonprofits don't start with those things. They start with something else. And that something else is market research, or in the case of a nonprofit, another way of explaining it is a community needs assessment. So this is where you're going to be really diving into what are the needs of your community and how does your concept for a nonprofit actually meet those needs or solve the problems of the community that you're trying to solve. I estimate that you would be spending about 8 to 10 hours per week on the items I'm about to describe. So if you have a full-time job doing something else, hopefully that is manageable. Of course, if you are dedicating your full-time effort to this process, it could go a little faster too. Let's talk about week number 1. In week 1, you want to focus on broad issues research. Your goal here is to really get a better understanding and education of the community or social issue that you are passionate about and hope to solve by starting a nonprofit. So an example output of a goal you could measure for this week is something like read and take notes on 20 or more articles on the social issue you want to tackle, including articles about some promising solutions that other communities have tried and where they are in succeeding, what's working, what's not working. So at this point, you have a broad general education on the issue that you're trying to tackle. If you didn't already have that, you are at least getting some more education on that. In week 2, you want to focus on putting that education in the context of the community that you plan to serve. So that might be a particular city or a state or a region. And you want to take the issue that you learned about and start finding experts, especially experts in your area, who can offer more insights into the issue. So week 2, you're going to spend just finding these experts. It could be experts outside of your area, perhaps in a city or region that's similar to yours. So there's at least some relationship, some similarity between how you might approach the issue. But your goal here is to just make a spreadsheet or a list of all of the people that you wish you could talk to who are experts in the field of, just making something up here, affordable housing or anti-violence efforts or whatever it may be. Find the experts, research them, and find their contact information to compile on your list. That's your output for week 2. For week 3, you're going to start focusing on reaching out to these experts because you really want to talk to them and learn what they know. So an example output for week 3 might be reach out to 20 of the experts from your list and see if they'd be willing to schedule an interview or appointment with you so you can talk to them further. Another output of this week is to create a list of interview questions that you want to ask these experts on the issue. Again, this is all part, excuse me, of your market research effort to validate the ideas you have around starting a nonprofit, because you don't want to assume you know a solution that's going to work to tackle the problem in the community that you want to tackle by starting a nonprofit. You might waste a lot of time if you go down a rabbit hole with an idea that's not already validated. Okay, so you're reaching out and you've got these interview questions. Some of these interview questions might be things like, what aspect of this issue are you already tackling? If the issue is, let's say, homelessness, are they tackling a certain demographic area of homelessness? For example, specifically youth homelessness or homelessness for veterans or homelessness for senior citizens. An interview question you might ask these experts could be, what have those directly impacted by this issue said that they needed most? So presumably these experts have talked to the people impacted by the problem. For example, unhoused populations, people experiencing homelessness. Well, what are they saying they actually need as a solution to the problems that they might be facing? Another interview question might be, what are some strategies you have been trying? What's working? What's not working? And then questions about what are the gaps you're seeing in the services being provided out there to meet the needs of the people impacted by the issue. And of course, what are some of the common types of funding streams that have been effective in the work that they're already doing? This will give you some great ideas for the business model later. Okay, because it can take some time to get on people's calendars and schedule out interviews, you would consider dedicating weeks 4, 5, 6, and 7, so a whole 4-week period, just on doing these interviews to further your market research. So an example output for these couple of weeks could be to conduct 5 interviews per week with the experts that you identified. Week 8 is all about reviewing what you've learned so far and compiling your notes. At this stage, you want to be looking through your notes, identifying any common threads or themes that you've heard from your interviews of experts and from your other research that you've been doing. And you want to start putting all these together into some text that will form the market research section of the business plan that you're going to want to develop when you're starting a nonprofit. So with your market research now at least mostly done, you want to focus weeks 9 through 12 on developing and refining the rest of your nonprofit business plan. Now, I just want to put in a disclaimer here that remember, you're going to need to recruit a board of directors to start a nonprofit, and that you should keep a little bit of an open mind and be flexible, because as you recruit board members, they might also have some great ideas or inputs that might further refine this business plan. So just something to keep in mind. But you do want to have a basic business plan to start with to attract board members also. They might ask what the mission is, what the model is, and having that tool, that business plan to show them as you're trying to recruit them could really be inspiring to get them on board. See what I did there? On board? If you're not sure what else goes in a nonprofit business plan, here's a quick overview. Obviously, you want your organization's name and mission statement and vision statement. I have some great videos describing how to put those together if that's not something you're already familiar with. You're going to want a description of the first services or the first program you plan to offer as part of your nonprofit. So how are you actually going to achieve your mission? What are the activities and the programs you're going to offer? And then you're going to need a budget for your first 1 to 3 years, just a draft budget outlining some of the major costs you're expecting and the ways that you plan to generate revenue to cover those costs. I have a great video that details how to put together a nonprofit business plan a little bit more, so be sure to check that out too. All right, that is your first 12-week year plan to start establishing a new nonprofit. The second period of 12 weeks is going to be focused on that paperwork and the logistics, the things you need to pull together for the actual formation of the nonprofit itself. All right, week 1 is all about using what you've already put together in the previous 12 weeks, that nonprofit business plan and your market research, to start compiling the things you're going to need to file for official 501c3 tax-exempt status as a public charity in the United States. So you are going to need to recruit a board of directors. And I recommend that you start with this step rather than trying to start with all the rest of the paperwork, because it's going to take the longest of the activities, I think. And it is going to be a larger, more complex task, especially if you don't already know people who are interested in serving on your board. And again, these can't only be family members or business partners unless you're forming a private foundation. The IRS wants you to recruit people who are not related to you by family or business relationships to be on a nonprofit board, because a nonprofit board is supposed to be representative of the community that you're serving. So for week 1, we want to focus on outlining the board roles that we need. And I would recommend at this early stage, unless you have several people that you think are interested in being on the board, start with the minimum that you need. In most states in the United States, minimum number of board members that you need is 3, but check your state rules because it does vary by state. And you're going to need your board officers to be some of your first board members. So your president or chair, vice president, vice chair, secretary, and treasurer are some common officer roles. So writing out the volunteer board descriptions of each of these roles is something you're going to need to do in order to be able to effectively recruit people to serve in these roles. In weeks 2 through 4 of this phase, you're going to focus on 2 things, and that is recruiting your board of directors, your initial board, and raising or saving enough money to file the paperwork to become a nonprofit. Even if you don't work with a lawyer, which has its own cost associated with it, there is required fees for incorporating your nonprofit in your state and then to file your paperwork with the federal government. So at the very least, you're going to need a couple $100s to take care of those filing fees. As for recruiting board members, you're going to use the board descriptions that you just wrote as a recruiting tool, because people usually don't want to make such a big commitment, such as serving on a board, without knowing what they're going to be asked to do or what will be expected of them. So your board descriptions can be given to candidates that you're talking to help them understand what role they'd be filling and what would be expected of them as a volunteer board member. Anything from how many hours per month they might be committing to some of their responsibilities. Week 5, you're going to take the first paperwork step of incorporating your nonprofit in the state that you'll be operating in. This is usually done through your Secretary of State or a similar entity, so make sure you're looking up for your state what agency you need to go through to file to be incorporated as a nonprofit in your state. Week 6, you can do a couple more administrative tasks while you're waiting for the state to approve, hopefully, your incorporation request. You can go get your EIN or employee identification number. This will be a number given to you by the IRS that will, once you get your 501c3 tax exempt status, that will become your tax ID number. Another thing you can can do is team up with the board members that you just recruited to write your organization's bylaws. This is a governing document that outlines how you will govern the organization. From how do you vote? So is it a majority vote wins? Is it 2/3 of a vote wins? How do you elect new board members? What is a board term? Do board members serve for 1 year, 3 years, et cetera, et cetera? All of these things go in your bylaws, and there are plenty of awesome templates online if you're looking for an example to get you started. Now, one thing you'll be required to do to finalize the paperwork for your nonprofit is to hold a board meeting and have the board members that you've recruited vote to approve the bylaws that they just wrote and any other policies that you've written that will be part of your package that you're going to submit to the government for 501c3 status. This is also a time during this first board meeting to go through some of the things that you're going to be submitting to the federal government when you file in the final phase of this 12-week period. Things like your draft budget for the next couple of years, the board roles and assignments that they will have. So let's say you haven't elected who exactly is going to be your treasurer yet. You would do that at that first meeting and have a vote to affirm it and make sure it's all recorded in meeting minutes. Weeks 8 through 12, I have suggested here that you just spend on filling out your federal paperwork to get your nonprofit tax exempt status. This is usually Form 1023, and you can work with a lawyer if you have the resources to work with a lawyer. Some feel that that brings you peace of mind. There isn't a legal requirement that you have to work with a lawyer to file your paperwork, but like I said, it can be really helpful because the IRS will reject you if you have mistakes on your application. So let's go through just a quick checklist of what you're gonna need in hand that you've already been working on in the previous weeks to submit with your IRS application for nonprofit status. It's going to include your approved articles of incorporation. So the state hopefully has gotten back to you at this point saying, yep, you are now incorporated as a nonprofit in our state. It's going to include your mission statement, a copy of the bylaws that your board just wrote. It's going to include a conflict of interest policy and a description of your activities and services. So the description of the program you previously wrote. The projected budgets that we talked about are going to need to be in there, and a description of how you plan to fundraise to meet your costs as an organization. All of that is going to be part of your Form 1023 application. And after that, you just gotta wait, because the IRS could take anywhere from a couple months to several months to get back to you on whether or not you have your status approved. Let me clarify, you don't just have to sit there and do nothing. You could be working on other aspects of your organization, like starting to develop a donor base or recruit volunteers. But you'll have to wait for the approval of the IRS. So what do you think about this framework? I love it because I'm very goal-oriented, but as you can see, this would be a pretty intense pair of 12 weeks or 6-month period. So do you think it would work for you? Why or why not? Share in the comments below. If you are starting a nonprofit or developing a fundraising strategy and you need some extra help, don't forget to check out my online courses at foundertofulltime.com. They can guide you through that process, of course. And subscribe to my newsletter linked below this video. Like I said, we've got tips and strategies and sometimes funding opportunities that I come across are all in that newsletter. And last thing, I have a group on Facebook called Change the World or Bust. We have thousands of people in there from around the world talking about how they are making a social impact, and I would love for you to join me there. That's all I have for you today. See you later. Bye.